Hey, everybody. Welcome, Day Drinkers. I'm Molly Fader. I write women's fiction as Molly Fader. Romance is Molly O'Keefe, just in case you were wondering who I was. And you're here to listen to Day Drinking with Authors. This is the podcast, the interview series where I pick a book, the author picks a drink, and we discuss both. There's no drink tonight, but there is a really, really special and spectacular debut. Anna E. Collins is here to talk about her breezy and fun rom-com Love at First Spite. And I'm super excited to have her here. There's something really special about debut authors and debut books that feels really special. So I'm excited to be able to talk to her. First, I'm going to read you the back cover copy because my mom likes that. So here we go. Love at First Spite. They say living well is the best revenge, but sometimes spreading the misery seems a whole lot more satisfying. That's interior designer Danny Porter's justification for buying the vacant lot next to her ex-fiance's house, the house they were supposed to live in together before he cheated on her with their realtor. Danny plans to build a vacation rental that will A, mess with his view and his peace of mind, and B, prove that Danny is not someone to be stepped on. Welcome to Project Spite House. That plan quickly becomes complicated when Danny is forced to team up with Wyatt Montego, the handsome, haughty architect at her firm and the only person available to draw up blueprints. Wyatt is terse and stern, the kind of man who eats a sandwich with a knife and fork. But as they spend time together on and off site, Danny glimpses something deeper beneath that hard veneer, something surprising, vulnerable, and real. And the closer she gets to her goal, the more she wonders if winning revenge could mean losing something infinitely sweeter. That's quality romance right there. Let's bring in Anna. Hi, Anna.
Hi.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us tonight. Debut author. This is so exciting.
I know. Well, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here.
So I was reading in your acknowledgments in the back of the book, and this book was started as a pitch war?
No, this was not a pitch wars book.
Oh, really?
It was, yeah, it was not. It was, I have an awesome group of friends and fellow writers. We call ourselves Rompire, and it was a Rompire baby. It was kind of a brainstorm. So the people in the group are from Pitch Wars, but it was not a Pitch Wars book. No.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. So have you done pitch wars before?
Yeah, I was in Pitch Wars in 2017 with a women's fiction book, because that's what I've written mostly. And yeah, 2020 happened.
But this is the one that happened. So
yeah,
spite houses.
Yeah.
Which truthfully, reading this book was the first I'd heard of it, is a real thing.
It's a real thing. It's really out there, but there are people who are petty enough to go all the way.
So this book, the inspiration, you had read an article.
Yeah, a few years back, I can't tell you what article it was, but I had read an article about spite houses around the world. There are several in the US. There's one right here in Seattle. And it's, people who felt wronged in some way and had the means and opportunity to get, their comeuppance on whoever they didn't, brothers or spouses or whoever it was, and build a spite house. You can Google it and you see all these really nutso houses, either built very close together or, a very colorful building squeezed in between two others, or I don't know. I found it fascinating enough to make a note of it in my list. I keep a list of ideas in my phone. And a couple of years later, when I needed something fun, I like I said, I mostly write or women's fiction. It was all I wrote. And 2020, I kind of needed something a little lighter. And so going through my list, that was, a note that stood out to me. And I felt like that could be a really good setup for a rom-com.
That's so interesting, because you'd written in your author's note that you had wondered what happens when the building is done. Which
right.
is like, I mean, do they feel better? Are they like, I feel great? But then you're telling me that there are people who like make a point of letting other people know that they've built these houses. Like they're,
yeah.
wow.
I think that was what was lacking for me, in these stories, these articles about the Spite houses, is that you find out that why they built them, but then there's no follow-up, did they become friends again? Did they tear down a house? What happened after? Like, I always wanted to know, was it a successful revenge,
Right.
Did they feel satisfied in the
Was
end?
revenge
But
ever really successful?
I don't
That's such
know,
a
I
good
don't know.
question. I loved how,
Um,
you handled it in the book, and I don't wanna give away spoilers, but
right.
it's super satisfying in a lot of different ways. Like, the revenge is gotten in an interesting way, and people feel better, but people also move on. Was that did you know when you started this book that that would always be the way that the book would end? That Danny's revenge would change shape like that?
Um, I don't think I knew exactly how it would end. I don't think I knew exactly how the twist would happen. Um, that was I'm trying to remember now because it's been a couple of years.
Yeah, well, that's the part of a debut book too. How long have you been working on this? And how long
Um, yeah, so I wrote this book in 2020 in the spring, quarantine and all that, and edited it the rest of the year, and then it sold in the beginning of 2021. So it was a pretty quick thing, you know, the whole project from start to finish, because I was on sub with a couple of other books at the time, women's fiction. So it was sort of a lucky shot in the dark
Yeah,
that worked.
the right kind of book at the right kind of time.
Right. Yeah. And it was so
So,
much fun writing it too and just doing something different.
I was just gonna ask, what have you found in writing a rom-com versus writing women's fiction? Like, how was it harder? Was it easier? Were you like, "Is this funny?"
Well,
The pressure of
um,
rom-com.
yeah, I it's definitely a different approach. Obviously, if I approach a rom-com, I need to have my romance arc set in a different way. Most of my women's fiction have some sort of romance subplot, but it doesn't carry the story, so it's not as important. Um, but it's a challenge to sustain a whole book on romance. I know there's a lot of prejudice against romance as a genre, that it's, simple or whatever. And it is really not. Like, it is really not. It takes a lot of intricacy, I think, to sustain a romance plot from the beginning to the end of the book. So it's a different plotting process for me. Um, I really enjoy the always having that one main character, or the one hero, the
Mhm.
second character, to bounce back and forth. Because usually in my women's fiction, it's a core cast. There's usually one main character, but there's a core cast of that's a little bit bigger than just a couple, as
Mhm.
in romance. So I like diving into their back and forths. Um,
And that
it's
dynamic. That's such a good
Yeah.
point about that it requires such, intricacy. That is like, that plotting a romance is so subtle, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's the shifts in internal changes,
Right.
particularly in this one, because Danny's got a long way to go, right? She's got a
Mhm.
long way to
Yeah.
go, and it doesn't happen in one big fell swoop. It happens in
Right.
pieces, bit by bit. Uh,
Yeah, and Wyatt too. I mean, he's complicated.
Wyatt is complicated. I do wanna talk about, Wyatt for sure. We love a tack turn hero, right? We love a stern-faced, kind of
Right.
grumpy, what are his motives? Does he even like me? Sort of
Yeah.
thing. But he is particularly delicious as you peel the layers away. How was tell me how Wyatt came to be and how he changed in the course of writing and editing this book.
Yeah, so Wyatt, I have a soft spot for grumpy heroes. Not grumpy heroes that are mean, but grumpy heroes where, the heroes that you can tell right away as a reader that there's something hidden underneath. It's just a
Mhm.
veneer. Um, and I wanted him to be real. I wanted him to have his own issues and not just be this, um, stoic know-it-all that
Mm.
Danny thinks he is in the beginning. So, I always knew he was gonna be have many layers, like an onion.
Yeah.
Um, and I also wanted it was important to me, I knew from the start that he was gonna have, I don't know if I'm giving stuff away now
You're
or if I'm
not. I was
talking
gonna
about
ask
his
about it too,
okay.
so go
Yeah.
ahead. It's
Okay,
really
so that
fascinating.
that he has, Meniere's disease, which my husband has, that, so I know firsthand what it's like to love someone who has Meniere's disease, who has a chronic condition that affects your daily life in various ways. So it was important to me to have the representation, but also because I think it's something that a lot of people haven't heard of. Um,
Not at all. Like,
right.
it's really, I mean, I hate to say fascinating, but it was such a compelling character addition for this story for sure.
Yeah. So that was, and it was important to me to do that justice. So and not I didn't want it on the page just to have it on the page, but to show how something like that can affect a person genuinely,
Mhm.
but also the journey of coming to terms with it, you know?
Right.
And so I think that made him three-dimensional to me from the get-go because I knew that. My husband's very different from Wyatt. He's not that terse and stern type, but it was still it made the writing process fascinating for me because I got to put some of my husband into him and have it but turn it on its head at the same time, without giving too much away. It's just
Sure.
so he was really fun to write in that sense.
Yeah, one of the other things that I really liked about him too, and that I remembered as I was reading your book about, one of the things that I love about romance is, um, so much of a satisfying romance is heartbreak, right? Like,
Right,
is pain. And I feel like they have this section of the book where they are misunderstanding each other and hurting each other without really trying, and maybe sometimes trying to hurt each other, like that is so makes it all so much sweeter. And I was wondering, did you plot that going in? Was that something that sort of came out as you were working on it, or was it an editorial change?
it was a combination of the 2. I actually lightened up that part in edits. It was a little heavier to start with, and I think that's, coming from writing women's fiction, I tend to dive deeper in things, so I lightened that section up a bit, um, but I still wanted you know, I know a lot of, when I read books, I don't typically like stories where a simple conversation can fix everything, and I
Right.
know that there are readers who are gonna think that about this book. And all I can say is, like, when people have genuine heartbreak, it can take a lot for people to put words to that, and so I think some of the miscommunication is, that's what happens in real life because people aren't just willing to put their heart and soul out on the table if they're worried that a past hurt is gonna occur again.
Right.
Um, so I always knew that there was gonna be some miscommunication and misunderstanding based on them protecting their hearts, and especially maybe Wyatt protecting himself. I mean, Danny is protecting herself in a more external way with her revenge scheme. So and kind of holding on to that. And so they just have different ways of handling it.
Yeah, the argument from, and I'm a reader that would often say this, like, if a conversation can clear it up, then the conflict isn't real. But the
Mhm.
reality is that a conversation will clear up most things, like, but how much depth is put into that conflict and into that heartbreak is what makes that conversation, a four-part conversation and a grovel
Right,
conversation. One of the other parts that I really loved about the book was the kind of found family versus real family. And
right.
I thought Danny's parents' relationship was handled I mean, because that is something you could have, like, leaned into, right? But you
Mhm.
handled it so deftly, and it is a relationship that we have all seen, that we're all terrified of being a part of, like, it and how it affected her, I thought was beautifully shown and handled.
Oh, thank you.
Tell me the genesis for creating Danny's kind of backstory with her family.
Yeah, I always like to go into my stories kind of knowing what the wound is for my characters. I feel like that's a good starting point to know where they're at in the beginning and where I want them to be at the end so that I know, the healing process that has to take
Right.
place. So, I felt like it couldn't just be Sam hurting her. Sam hurting her would have to be a secondary hurt to a deeper wound, but kind of recall that, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. So, um, I I was wary of making her parents' relationship and their part in her life too big. So in the original version, it was toned down more than it is now. I added some more kind of nods to that in edits, um, because I was because this was my first rom-com, so I was very aware of not making it women's fiction, and
Right.
sometimes to the detriment of you know, depth. So there were some things there that because I didn't want the focus to be on her parents' relationship. That would have been women's fiction. I could write a whole book
Mhm.
about Danny and her parents, and that would
For
be
sure.
that would be a completely different book. But yeah, so that was important. I knew I wanted it in there enough to show, why is she reacting so strongly to the things that Sam had done, not just, the cheating, but how he how he treated her wishes and
Mhm.
them as a um, partners,
Right.
and why that kind of resounded so much within her in a negative way.
Yeah, it was a nice echo. It was a really good echo that he
Thank
had a
you.
reason for why he stepped all over whatever she wanted, but, she'd seen that too many times before.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was very
Yeah.
good. My, we are, we're kind of back down in lockdown in Toronto now, and, we all got COVID over the holiday.
Oh
So
no.
all of this to say is we've been watching so much HGTV. We are love it or list it fanatics over here. And I was just wondering, like, this is like if you love romance novels and you love HGTV, this is the
Sure.
perfect marriage. Was that
Yes.
like was this how was like research was like, and yes, keep watching, or I mean, because you get into permits and the rest of the nitty gritty.
Yeah. I mean, I used to be a huge fixer-upper, I watched all the time. I don't have cable right now, so I don't watch a lot of those shows. So that was actually not super intentional with this. I knew there was gonna be a house build, and obviously she's an interior designer, he's an architect. So there were just some, a lot of Googling my fencing regulations and, um plots and order, the structure of or the order of things when you build a house. Where do you put the foundation versus the electricity and the insulation and so that I was kind of learn as you go.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
what a rabbit hole. What a
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Um, so you and I actually share an editor. I don't know if you knew this. Melanie Fried
Yes.
is my editor as well. And I have to say, um, one of the things I admire, I mean, there's so much to admire and be appreciative about what she brings to my books. But one of the things I really admire is that her vision of the way a scene should move. Like it's like an arrow. Like I feel like I hand her this big fat blob and she just like cuts out all the fat and it's just these scenes become these arrows. And it was interesting because I was reading your book and I was like, oh wow, I can see. I mean, not to say that you weren't writing lean, fast,
Oh
taut
no.
scenes, but I was just like the compliment of a page turner is the hardest thing to write in the world is a book that's easy to read. That you you know what I mean? That you can't, that you can't put down. And I feel
Yeah.
like this book had that tension in it, that dynamic. How was your experience with Melanie? Was she doing the same sort of editorial process with you?
Yeah, I think she has a really good eye for knowing where, like, the comment I would get a lot was, um, "The reader will infer this, like, it doesn't need to be here." I tend to insert too many rhetorical questions in my internal, dialogue for the character, and that's also kind of a, uh, from women's fiction where there's a lot more inner rumination going on. And so, for me, it's like, well, I feel like that needs to be on the page. And then Melanie would show that if you take it out and you read through it, you will still get it from the line of dialogue or whatever
Mhm.
is before and after. And so that was a really interesting process. I tend to write pretty lean, um, and as I write my drafts. It's and very linear
Mhm.
when I'm drafting. Um, but I'd never thought of that you can overwrite with very small means, and I think that's the beauty of an editor, that they can it's not the big slashes, it's like those little
Yeah.
tweaks,
Yeah.
that make all the difference.
Yeah, it's true. She has a real vision for the world you're trying to create, right? And
Mhm.
the weight, whatever, if it's, too many rhetorical questions or am I, too many descriptions or something like that, like the way that
Right.
will snap that tension. And I
Mhm.
think it's just so invaluable. Um, so this is your first book. You are a debut author. How has
Yep,
this process been? And to have sold, written, and published all in the same pandemic.
I know. Yeah, I mean, I guess the
I mean,
pandemic was good to me in that sense, in the midst of all the stress. No, it was I mean, it's been very intense. I actually had just gotten 2 of my women's fiction under contract before Graydon House picked up Love at First Bite. So,
what?
I didn't know initially that this was gonna be my debut. Um, so last year was intense because I edited this one and and my first women's fiction that comes out later this spring.
Man, that's
So,
amazing. Congratulations. I mean, when it
yeah,
rains,
thank
it
you.
pours.
Yeah. So that's and the women's fiction is with a different publisher. So it's been really interesting to kind of juggle the two. Fortunately, I was able to focus on Love at First Sight first. And
Mhm.
then once I was done with that, I could switch into These Number Days and do that. And then, yeah, 2021 was intense, but in all good ways. So that's how the process for me was. Initially, I thought my women's fiction was going to be my debut, and then when Graydon House picked up this one, that switched, and then it was like an 11-month to pub date when I started editing that, so that was also quick.
That is
Um,
really quick. Wow.
yeah.
What a crazy education you've had. Like in
Oh,
terms of
it's true.
publishing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so as it's sort of unfurled, has it been surprising? Has it been what you kind of expected? Has it been I mean, I know that you have a strong writing community that's had some success in publishing. So you certainly have mentors kind of like
Yeah.
helping you through, but like how has the process been in terms of
I
your
I mean,
experience?
I don't honestly, I don't know that what kind of expectations I had. I didn't have many preconceived notions. Um, it's been interesting also working with 2 different publishers just to
Yeah.
see the difference in the process and also the difference between women's fiction and rom-coms at the same time. And um, yeah, and then the updates and the team at Graydon House has been so fantastic. They I'm just in awe of all the work that they do behind the scenes, and occasionally I'll get an email with a fun update, and I'm like, "Oh, this is what's happening now." So that's been amazing, and, yeah, I mean, it really has been so much fun. I
Oh,
don't
that's
really know how
great.
to describe it, and, fortunately, I had another book that I was rewriting in the fall, so I didn't have to just sit and wait because that was my between July and now, it's pretty quiet for me. For
Mhm.
the author, the last 5, 6 months before pub, we're not doing a whole lot more than, keeping up on social media and stuff like that. So, all of a sudden it was January. I don't know where December went.
Right. Yeah. So what is next for you? Like what can we look forward to?
So, Next is I have a women's fiction called These Numbered Days that's coming out with Up Publishing in spring. I don't have an exact date yet. So that's a complete departure from the rom-coms. So
These
that
numbered
will be
days? Is that what it's called?
these numbered days. And currently there is I don't know how much to say about that, but I've written a second rom-com.
Is
It
it
is
Mia's book?
what?
Is it the cousin's book?
It's not related. It's a separate, I know.
Oh, readers are gonna want her book. God, oh my
Um,
goodness, she is a delight. She
yeah.
Mia, she was one of those secondary characters that comes out of the blue. I mean, she had all the one-liners. Like we really want to see her happy ending too. So
Maybe in the future.
yeah,
Yeah.
good, good, good,
So
good.
so we'll see what happens with the second rom-com. It's in the process.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And well, it's so nice to hear like good, lovely success stories from debut
Yeah.
authors.
Thank
It
you.
should be fun and it should be exciting and a real learning experience. I feel like you've managed to get all those
Yeah.
experiences.
It's been really amazing.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come and chat with me
Oh,
tonight. And
sure.
I
Thank you
am
for having me.
looking forward to these numbered days and whatever else you've got coming out. Please keep us informed.
Will
Everybody
do.
out there, stay safe, read a book, have a drink, get vaccinated. Good night.
Good night.